everyone, it's Laura. This is Free Practice Friday. Today we are going to work on, well, this is always Qigong. This is a movement called standing on a boat. We're going to play around a little bit with that and then we'll go from there. I hope everyone's doing well. It has been pouring rain where I am. The roads are flooded. It's been very, very, very wet. The ferns are about this tall. They're almost as tall as I am. But it's been great, and it's a lot cooler today. It's a little less humid, and we are supposed to be getting some sun, which is exciting. So let's talk a little bit about standing on a boat. So if I do standing on a boat facing you, it kind of looks like this, which is to say, it kind of looks like nothing. You can't really see somebody doing it. It's not completely internal, it's actually a physical movement. You might see my body swaying back and forth a little bit. If I turn to the side, you can actually get a little bit better sense of what this looks like. You can see me rocking back and forth. And what I'm actually doing is shifting my weight. So, yes, I'm rocking forward and back, but I'm shifting my weight from the ball of my foot to the heel. And so if we think about the big toe and the pinky toe always being attached to the ground, and then the ball of the foot, the big toe, pinky toe, and ball of the foot form what we'll call the small triangle. So if it was like this, it's a small triangle with the ball of the foot, and that's when we shift the weight forward. We have most of our weight there, and then when we shift back onto the heel, we've got the big toe, the pinky toe, and the heel, so we've got the large triangle. And we shift the weight back and forth. This is something that is done, there's a lot of discussion in Tai Chi about weight shifting and where your weight should be. I don't talk about it very much in the Qigong that I teach, but I like this movement because it's the basis for some of the other movements, or it's something you can add to some of the other movements, and it adds a lot to it. So if I turn sideways again, I'm shifting my weight forward, so this is onto the small triangle, and then back onto the large triangle. So I'm on my big toe, pinky toe, and the ball of my foot, and then my big toe and pinky toe stay down, and I shift the weight from the ball to the heel. So there's a little bit of movement in the Qigong movements. For example, if we're doing Phoenix Ascends the Flames, which we've done in the past, we did it a few videos ago, we can just be stiff. If you watch me from the side, we can be stiff and just do it standing in place, right, with no real rocking. Or we can shift the weight forward as the arms come up, and then shift back as they float down. And it becomes more of a full body kind of movement. We've also done monkey leaps from the tree. It's the same thing. Once you learn this movement, you'll find you're adding it into a lot of different movements. We don't do it so much in the lateral movements. I think we did Embracing Sun and Moon. That's the fast version of it. But that's more of a twisting and side-to-side movement. So there might be a little bit of rocking back and forth, but that's not the main part of the movement. So standing on a boat, we do this, when you see someone doing it, it's kind of like they're just balancing, right, as the boat's moving and they're standing on a boat. So that's where the name comes from. And it gets, like I said, it gets the full body involved in the movement. And you can also do this, for example, when you're standing in line waiting to check out at the grocery store or something like that, to just have, rather than standing stiff and rigid and you're holding onto the cart, you can actually just rock back and forth a little bit. And you can do it pretty, you're not doing a huge like, ooh, I'm going way forward and then I'm coming back. It's a pretty subtle movement, so you can keep the body moving a little bit even when you're essentially standing still. It also is said to help the lymph get pumped back up into the upper body so that we don't have fluid retention in our lower body. So the lymph, the blood gets circulated by the heart, right? And the heart is pumping, so there's a way to for the blood to move, but the lymph doesn't move. There's no pump to move it. So if we do a little bit of this back and forth, a little bit of the swaying forward and back with standing on a boat, we're actually activating a little bit of a pump. We're moving our lower body. You're not actually coming up on your toes, but if you were to come up on your toes, that would be a little bit of a pump for the lymph. So, but you're activating your calves a little bit and helping that lymph to not just stay down in your lower body if you're standing for a long time, but actually get circulated back through the body. Couple other pieces with this. When you're shifting the weight forward, I don't know if you can see, this shirt's kind of baggy, your back arches just a little bit, not a whole lot. And then when you shift back, it's almost like you are sitting on a high stool. So your pelvis is shifting a little bit. As you shift forward, as you lean forward, your pelvis is going to shift so that your back arches. And then when you shift the weight back onto the heels, the pelvis also straightens out and allows you to flatten the back a little bit. So we're going from an arch, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but an arch to a more flat back. An arch to a more flat back. You might find your knees bending in the process, or you might find that if you do try to actively tilt your pelvis, which is one way to get used to this movement, and again I'm exaggerating so that you can see, but you'll find that as you sit back, your knees might have to bend a little bit, or you might have to bend them in order to put your pelvis back into a more neutral position. So we rock forward and arch the back a little bit, and then rock back and flatten the back. And again, this is kind of like sitting on a tall stool. If you were at a bar and there was a stool that was pretty high that you might have to kind of climb onto, but you can lean back against it. It's almost like you're just leaning a little bit against it, you're leaning your butt against it, and you're just kind of planting yourself there. This also creates a kind of upward movement as we shift forward, and then a sinking movement as we shift backwards. So we feel a little bit lighter as we shift forward, and then a little bit heavier as we shift back. I think monkey leaps from a tree is a great movement to, it's the easiest one that I've found to demonstrate the idea of the light and the heavy, because monkey leaps from a tree, right, you're starting to jump and you're shifting forward, and then as you come back, you're landing on the ground and your weight is much heavier, right? So if I were actually leaping from a tree, I might jump up and then I come down. So we've got the forward movement, we're up on our toes, up on the balls of our feet. Your heels don't really lift. If they do at all, maybe you can slide a piece of paper under there. When you're first practicing this, there will be a tendency to shift too far, and your heels might come up when you shift forward, and as you shift back you might go too far and you bring your toes up to balance yourself. But really, once you get comfortable with this movement, it's very subtle, and the heels don't come up and the toes don't come up. So everything stays flat on the ground. One of my teachers used to say, your big toe and little toe are thumbtacked to the floor, but that always felt really violent to me. So maybe they're glued to the floor, they're stuck to the floor. It's humid enough where I am right now that actually my feet just kind of stick to the floor because everything's very damp. So the glue imagery works a lot better for me. So monkey leaps from a tree, you're reaching up, right? A little bit lighter, you're lighter than air, you're starting to leap from that tree, and then you land. And you probably wouldn't land directly on your heels, but ultimately you'd land on the balls of your feet and you'd roll so that some of your weight was on your heels. So this is a great movement to be able to practice the concept of standing on a boat. So again, if I'm sideways, I'm not completely stiff, just going like this, right? I'm not just moving my arms, or even just moving my arms, and then maybe I bend my knees a little bit at the end, straighten and bend. But there's a flowingness to the movement. It's not just up and down. It's forward, around, and then back out the bottom. So my hands are kind of making an ellipse, and my body is following that as well. And then we can add this into other movements. You'll notice if you practice this on a regular basis, even just for a couple minutes, you'll notice that you just kind of start doing it naturally in other movements. I don't know that we've done pushing mountains yet, but I know that some of you know pushing mountains. Again, I'll do it from the side. I tend to, again, this is not just an arm movement, but in the main part of pushing mountains, I tend to do a lot of rocking back and forth. Maybe not quite this much. This is feeling like a little more movement than I usually do, but you definitely can get more of your body moving into it. So that is standing on a boat. This video is a little bit shorter than some of the other ones, but I wanted to introduce that concept because it's an interesting thing to practice, and it's one of those things that you can practice when you're out and about. You're not people aren't going to look at you strangely if you're just kind of shifting your weight back and forth. When I just moved from Boston, and I used to take the subway a lot, and and so this was one of those things that you kind of did all the time. You were always balancing your weight. If you were standing on the subway, there wasn't always a pole that you could reach to grab. Sometimes you were kind of far away, or sometimes just for fun, I would play and I'd maybe just put a finger on the pole, or try to do it without touching anything at all. The subway is moving. It's going from side to side and forward and back and stopping and going. And so I would kind of play a little bit with being able to shift my weight. It doesn't look entirely strange for you to be shifting your weight forward and back. And you can do it very, very subtly. I mean, you can even almost do it without moving your upper body. So if I'm turning sideways, I can do this a very, very little bit. And you can't even really tell. It almost feels to me like it looks like I'm breathing. Like it looks like my chest is coming up and then deflating a little bit. So you can do it in a very, very subtle way if you want to try it out in public and you don't feel comfortable doing the larger movement. But again, even the larger movement is quite subtle. So, even if I'm just standing in line going like this, it's really not that different from someone who is maybe shuffling side to side, or kind of fidgeting. They're moving around a little bit. Everybody's moving around. If you stand stiff and static, you're going to end up being stiff. You're going to move your cart up at the grocery store and be like, oh, as you get older, okay, now I got to move. So if you just keep everything moving a little bit, it can make life a lot easier. So that's standing on a boat. Any questions? Let me know. See you guys later.